Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest is Dr. Geeta Nayyar, a physician, speaker, author, and media contributor. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at DRG Nayyar, Nayyar. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and occasional guest host of the show. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. Please like, please comment, please share, please retweet, repost, do all the things you do on social media in order to get people to join us. Comment on the post and tag your friends. They won't want to miss this show. Another really interesting show. Two Indian female doctors in a row. Slightly different topics though. We're going to be focusing on misinformation today, and Geeta's book Dead Wrong, which is going to be really interesting. We're going to be talking about COVID. We're going to be talking about social media. We're also going to be talking about AI. So we hope that you will join us and tell your friends about this show. We do this every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, and we take holidays off, but we often have guests from the New York Times or authors or other folks to share their wisdom with us. So let's go ahead and welcome a few people who are watching. Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. Jimmy Carter is watching from North Carolina. Hi, Mom. So, funny thing about my mom, she called me the other day, said, I wanted to hear your voice. And yeah, as moms want to do, I said, Mom, you heard my voice twice this week already. What do you need? Sunday show and Thursday show. But I think she wanted something more than that. So we had a good talk. Pradnya Haldapur is watching from Silver Spring. Doug Levy is watching from California. Ken Fisher watching from Iowa. And my sister is up early in Washington State watching the show. Patty Freudenberg is here as well. So with that, let's go ahead and bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan. Sri,
Morning.
how are you?
I'm good. Good morning from North Carolina. I am here and very happy to have the show with Dr. Geeta Nayyar, who has been a dear friend and great supporter of the COVID show we did throughout the pandemic. And she has a wonderful new book out that everyone should read. It's called Dead Wrong, Diagnosing and Treating Healthcare's Misinformation Illness. And there's so much to learn here. I will just tell you that she has a who's who of blurbers and with great testimonials from Ariana Huffington, Anna Navarro, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and Soledad O'Brien. And here's what Sanjay says. Let's just go back. It says, with refreshing clarity, Dead Wrong spotlights the challenges of separating fact from fiction when it comes to our healthcare. So we're going to be spending time with Geeta this morning. She'll join us in just a couple of minutes. As you know, Neil, typically I go through all the sections before we bring on our guest, but I'm not able to do that today because I'm in North Carolina. I did grab the parts of the paper that arrive in New York City on Saturday if you're a home subscriber. So I have some sections here, but let's just quickly look at the headlines. Trump allies are winning war over disinformation. So that's a perfect way to talk about the medical misinformation. And we know how they're tied together, especially in the last election and the current election. And then there's a prep photo for I can't
St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day is today. So happy St. Patrick's Day.
It was actually yesterday, Sri. St. Patrick's Day, right?
No, the parade is today. This is just the prep from yesterday.
The parade was yesterday.
17th is the parade, and the 17th is the celebration. But
sure,
because it was a beautiful day in New York, people are out. And here's Putin projects vision of glory, and Russians ignore messy reality. Kremlin stages a vote, and this is, of course, not just Russians. So many people in America believe that there's some great glory in Russia today. As Neil, you know, I lived in the Soviet Union, and Putin's idea is to bring back the Soviet Union, and he's trying to do that in the great Russian Empire. Let's see what else is on the
It,
front page.
I think, but when we say vote, Sri, we should do it in air quotes, right?
Air quotes, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Otherwise, you
so
get pushed off a balcony or you fall off accidentally. Paris puts the Olympic Games on a climate diet, innovative cooling and solar panels on the Seine. So that should be something that we'll all be looking forward to. And then speaking out for landlines in a digital age. Do you folks still have a landline, Neil?
no, we do not. We got rid of our landline quite a while ago, but you know what? We have thought about it recently. Uh, we haven't gotten Emily, our 10-year-old, a cell phone. Occasionally, we do leave her home alone now for an hour or two, and we wonder whether we should have a landline just in case.
Sure. Afghanistan in their rear view, Mr. Gill is in their passenger seat. So
It This is a story about a gentleman in California who has been giving driving lessons to women from Afghanistan. And
nice.
there's somewhere I remember seeing a quote that he may have taught more women to drive in Modesto than all of Afghanistan, which is
Oh,
kind of,
yeah, very
then we
sad.
drive
Very,
out there.
very, very sad. All right. So we're going to just show you, I'm going to show you what else I have here. Some of the some of the sections of the paper. This is the New York Times Magazine, and it's a very subtle cover here, as you can see. And it's about whitewash, the 50-year campaign to undo progress of the civil rights movement in the name of colorblindness. And this is by Nicole Hannah-Jones. Everyone remembers that the 1619 project was, had such an impact. This is her new essay looking at the impact of how the so-called idea of colorblindness, what it has done to American education, and more. A section that even Neil doesn't have outside Washington, D.C. is the metropolitan section that is only in home delivery in the New York City area. So I have that. The cover of it here is Birdhorf Life, Few Phones, Some Beer in the Hudson Valley. Communities founded by Christian pacifist movement grapple with modernity. And what else do we have here? The real estate section cover is, let's see, Smoothing the Path to Green, Central Park Sidewalk Restoration balances historical aesthetics and modern needs. A couple of more things before we bring on Dr. Geeta. Here is the book review cover, 22 of the funniest novels since Catch 22. And they have 3 of their top writers are picking the top 22. So we would like to take a look at that if we have time. And the arts and leisure cover is On the Move and Looking Ahead, which is about Adrian Lenker's last 2 solo records came from a place of sorrow. So that's the cover here. So I think we're ready to bring on Dr. Geeta Nayyar to talk about her excellent book, Dead Wrong, Diagnosing and Treating Healthcare's Misinformation Illness. Everyone, please share this with your friends, retweet, post so that everyone can see. And Geeta is a physician, speaker, author, and media contributor. We're delighted to have her with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sri. Wonderful to see you.
Greetings from North Carolina. You are in Florida. Just so happy to see you, and thank you for joining us. Are you a Sunday morning person?
I am not a Sunday morning person, but clearly my family is very different from Neil's entire family that is online this morning. Hi to the Park family.
Yeah.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, so I guess things are quiet at your home. So thank you for getting up and being with us. And congratulations on the book. Such great press that you've gotten, and I'm so happy to show everyone this book. Everyone should go out and get it. This is Diagnosing and Treating America's Misinformation Illness. You're a rheumatologist, so let's start there and tell us how your journey to fighting misinformation started, and talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So, the first question everyone asks me is, why did you write the book? What inspired you to write the book? And I don't want to spoil it for everyone. It's in chapter 1, but essentially my generation of physicians trained at the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I trained at George Washington University in DC at the time. And it was a really humbling time, very much a parallel to COVID, in that there was so much mis and disinformation. There was a lot of senseless death. For some reason, science had become politicized, religion had a role to play. And, at the time in my 20s, we were told this is a once in a lifetime sort of crisis, and we were going to be better physicians for it. Speed ahead to 2020 and seeing patients at University of Miami, we told our medical students and residents the exact same thing, which is this crisis is once in a lifetime. You're going to learn about public health while also learning clinical training. And I just felt like this is the story, Sri, that everyone in healthcare, every doctor, every nurse, we know mis and disinformation is around, but we're so busy putting out the fires that we never look to see who's starting them. And I think in the era of tech and AI and the power of spreading sort of these not half truths, that it's time to address the problem. It's time to call it out. It's not a new problem. It's just getting worse because of the era of technology we're in.
Yeah, I want to show everyone. You mentioned your time at George Washington University. Here's the young doctor getting started. You're still very young, but what's one thing you would say to her if you could today?
Oh my goodness. I would say slow down and take your time. It's all going to be there. It's all going to be there. When you're young, you're in such a rush to move your career forward, move your life forward. And I think the one thing I would say now, and I find myself saying to my 12-year-old is, don't rush it. Don't rush life. It's all going to come anyway. No matter which way it comes, it's coming.
Yeah, I agree. It goes so fast.
Yeah.
Patty is watching from New York. Rebecca is watching from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and Miriam is watching from Hell's Kitchen in New York City. Diane is watching from Margate, New Jersey. Folks, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and more recently we've started on Instagram as well. So on any of these platforms, share it with your friends, put it on your stories, and they can't watch now, they can watch later. And I love how Diane has just tagged her friend on Facebook. And everyone who cares about fighting misinformation and disinformation will love this show. Jonathan says, I think Putin wants to reestablish the Russian Empire more than the Soviet Union. I agree about that. And Marilyn is watching from California, though she's usually in Staten Island. She's up early as well. And happy Women's History Month, says Patty.
Sri, I'll just point out, we can't pull in comments from Instagram, but I have them, I'm monitoring them on our sides, at least the my account and Digimentor's. Want to point out that Tara Beagle, New York City, is watching on Instagram. I think you might know Tara.
I'm glad that Tara's watching.
Someone's logging in from the account.
Yeah, exactly.
Sri's dog.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for watching and sharing the show. This is so important, and we have a lot to talk about in this book. We know that you also put together a really nice website, so people can take a look at that as well, and we'll show folks the site so they can go and find it. It's right at drgeetanayyar.com, and there you can learn more about this USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And there's so much, you've given so much information here. And as you know, there's so much marketing that needs to be done. Dr. G, MD, and MBA. We should point that out.
Thanks so much, Sri. Look, I think we're living in a post-pandemic world. You and I met during the pandemic, and this is the time, right? If we don't address this issue now, I don't know when we will, if we haven't learned from that crisis.
What's the biggest thing that those of us who care about this topic, and everybody should be paying attention to?
Well, look, first and foremost, in healthcare, we often talk about it becoming a more consumer-focused industry. And what we have to remember as consumers is we have to first help ourselves. So we have to start understanding that when information comes our way, that we're looking at the source. We're looking to see if there is evidence-based medicine involved, and that we're also partnering with a physician. There is no one better to guide you than your own physician, and asking the question of what should I be reading? Where are the sources I should go to? Whenever I make a new diagnosis for a patient, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, whatever it might be, I always make that part of my conversation, which is that I do want you to be informed. I do want you to understand your disease. I know I can't also answer all of your questions in these 5 minutes we have together, but here's some great sources: the Lupus Foundation, the Arthritis Foundation. And I do say, please do not go to the World Wide Web. Please do not go just anywhere, right? Go to the sources I trust. Go to the sources that are written for the third grade, sixth grade consumer level education, but be informed. And again, we've also seen many influencers on TikTok do really well. We have a lot of physician colleagues on all social media channels: Instagram, Twitter, X. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, pointing out the ones that I follow, pointing out the ones that I recommend, because otherwise you end up down the rabbit hole. Consumers end up down a rabbit hole, and it's very difficult to pull them out. And often they are being victimized, being sold supplements, being sold all kinds of things instead of what is actually efficacious, like a mammogram or a colonoscopy.
And that's so important for people to realize that there are things that look real. I mean, that's the problem on the internet, as you know, that everything has equal weight. It looks professional. It looks like you can trust it. And we had misinformation at the very top of the political food chain in America, as you know, during the pandemic. And that was part of the reason we're here. But if you look back at the pandemic, what are things that could have been different, that could have saved America? As we all know, America, even with 5% of the population, had 20% of the deaths, some number like that. What went wrong here?
Well, look, again, science, healthcare, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that the healthcare industry has to start making mis and disinformation a priority, because in the absence of healthcare doing that, there are misfits from all over the spectrum, whether political, whether religious, whether in the commercial space selling things. In the absence of healthcare's voice, in the absence of ensuring that payers, providers, life sciences company, med tech companies own the narrative for winning trust back into science, others out there will destroy that trust, and have. And that's what has largely happened during the pandemic. One of the quotes in the book that I love, from one of the folks I interviewed, is that mis and disinformation grows in the dark. So in other words, when we just forget about it as healthcare leaders and we don't address it, someone is out there really profiting off of it and propagating it. And in the era of AI, that's one of the things we have to think about, Shri, is to say, how are we regulating this? How are we thinking about the social media space? For too long now, this has been left to the social media companies to self-regulate. And if we do the same with AI, we could get into some very dangerous waters. So we do need to take some of the lessons from the pandemic and ensure that we actually action them before they continue to propagate.
I love that quote that Niels put on the screen about mis and disinformation grows in the dark. Folks, that's Dr. Geeta Nayyar. This is her book, Dead Wrong, about the misinformation pandemic we're having. And we'd love for you to join us with your questions and post them in the chat, and we'll bring them to Geeta as we also talk about the news and what's going on today. And I will also show you some excerpts from the book. And there was a question here from Patty about what did Dr. Geeta say was her influence in her career path. I know one of the answers is right here on the screen.
Yes, that's my mom and dad. The book is actually dedicated to them. You'll enjoy the dedication if you haven't seen it, Shri, at the beginning. Thank you for the question, Patty, and happy Women's History Month to you as well. A big part of my inspiration is both of my parents are immigrants, actually came to America because there was a physician shortage in the 1970s. So I was born in Beckley, West Virginia. They were recruited to rural health at the time. And I think, all these things, you absorb them. I've always loved science and medicine, and I've also been a very people forward person. And so medicine just really felt like the natural path for me. And I haven't ever looked back, and I still think it's one of the most rewarding professions out there.
And what would you say to people who are thinking about going into the medical field now? Many people were drawn to it during the pandemic because they saw the heroic things that so many people did, nurses, doctors, et cetera. But others are also scared and worried about being a doctor in today's world, or a nurse, or just being in the healthcare industry?
Again, there is no better profession in my mind, especially as someone who has had plenty of experience on the business side as well. Ultimately, we're all looking for a purpose, and medicine provides that. That said, I would say that healthcare is changing, and physicians and physician leaders need to be a part of that change. So being mindful, if you are putting yourself on a path to medicine, whether it's an MBA, whether it's the policy side, whether it's the technology side, or healthcare to improve, we need to have more physician leaders involved in that improvement and being part of that change making. So if you have the grit and the grace to do that, we need you. Healthcare needs you. But those that understand healthcare need to be part of the change.
I love that. Naomi, who's watching on the Upper West Side of New York, says, I'm very skeptical of physicians, or physicians like, who promote and sell supplements. Many seniors got sucked into this rabbit hole.
Naomi, many people get sucked into this rabbit hole. And again, it's usually because of the absence of a relationship with the physician, with the pediatrician. So number one, having someone that actually knows you, knows your personal health, your personal family's health is going to be critical. And two, looking at the sources. What are the evidence, right? What is the evidence on whether a supplement has actually improved, XYZ condition? But you're absolutely right. And this is what disinformation is when people profit off of false information with the intention to harm and the intention to manipulate.
And we're seeing the effects of that all over. You did mention your dedication to your mom and dad, and it's a beautiful little poem that you put together here. It says, for my mom and dad, for teaching me the truth always matters, for inspiring me to pursue a career in medicine, for showing me that you can have grit and grace at the same time. And it goes on. It's so beautiful. Everyone, when you buy the book, you should definitely look at that. And the last line in it is, for convincing me I'm worth 1,000 sons, SONS. And that's so beautifully done. And then you said this book is also dedicated to the healthy and the sick, the knowledgeable and the ignorant, the rich and the poor, the old and the young, those who believe in God and those who do not. To every patient I had the privilege to care for. Just so it's such an unusual and rich and deep dedication. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Shri. I put a lot of thought into it. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Miriam points out that too many have agendas unrelated to helping people. And by the way, Miriam, happy birthday. Miriam's a wonderful photographer, photojournalist who's taken book jacket photos for so many successful authors. So we should talk about your book jacket author photo. And if you want to give a shout out.
Sure. My book jacket, Miriam, happy birthday. Maybe we need to talk about the next book. Maybe she will connect us. Book jacket cover, Leah from Image Me Photography. I've known her for a while. She actually does headshots, professional headshots on all of our family photos for the past few years. So I convinced her to do this one, and just really appreciate her making me look good, her making me look good.
Yes, you do look great. And we should point out, you were not just an MBA, you were the chief medical officer for both Salesforce and AT&T, and you appeared on some of the biggest channels in the world. You have a couple of co-authors, including one who went to Columbia Journalism School, where I was a professor for 20 years. Yeah.
That's right. Jack Murtha and Thomas Castles, my research and writing team, just fantastic. There's a good acknowledgement to them in the back as well. We've known each other for a long time, and I just can't thank them enough for their partnership. Outstanding writers. And yes, Jack specifically remembers you, Shri. So that's wonderful. Thank you for the shout out.
Please say hi to Jack. And you call them both your white brothers that your Indian parents didn't tell you about.
That's right. When you feel the energy, the karmic energy from friends, colleagues, and I felt it when I first met them. I was actually doing an interview for them on a program, and that's how we met. And I think that was 15 years ago. It was a very long time. So we've worked together both at Salesforce, Greenway, several companies that I've worked out before. I've pulled them into different.
Yeah, folks, follow Pradnya's lead. She's going to LinkedIn, where we're live right now, and tagging a bunch of friends so that they can catch the show live or later. And Miriam says, thank you for the generous shout out. Ellen's watching from the Upper East Side. And Doug has a important question. How can the healthcare sector regain credibility in this era of anti-science and alternate facts?
Well, look, what's interesting is that people still trust their doctor. About 92% of all Americans still trust their physician, but 52% of Americans don't trust the healthcare system. And that's a huge disconnect, right? So, what the healthcare system has to do is really understand that the trust remains between the patient and the physician. So, to the extent we are putting infrastructure in place that really protects that relationship, right? So that you have access, you are able to get questions answered, you're able to do all of the things that are handed to you on a clipboard when you go to the doctor's office, instead to be able to do that before, essentially to take those friction points out of the patient physician relationship. That is where healthcare needs to focus, whether that's waiting room time, whether that's your data, your medical records, being able to get access to that. And of course, appointments, right? We know that we have a physician shortage. Depending on where you are in the country, it can take 6 to 9 months to get an appointment. But there are also virtual medicine appointments. And how do healthcare systems need to think about the strategy, that hybrid strategy, to address access, which is the number one problem we have in healthcare? Without access, you are left to look to other sources, whether it's on social media, whether it's your neighbor, your family members. But that's a big part of how we've lost trust, is we've just gone to different places.
There's so much in this book that people will enjoy, including your story, which we'll get to in a moment. But I do want to show people that there are some books, some photographs of you in younger years. Here's you in elementary school preparing for a Diwali show and teaching folks some Bhangra, which is, of course, Punjabi dance. But here's the earliest picture of you in your mom's tummy.
You actually read the book, Sri. I'm so impressed.
So tell us a little bit about your mom.
Oh, my mom is amazing. My mom is amazing. She's someone that has always been way ahead of both her generation and her country. My parents are from India, as you know. And she is just someone that, my goodness, she was an ophthalmologist in India, in the UK. You have to retrain. You have to do your residency over anytime you immigrate. Then she did OBGYN in England. In the US, she did internal medicine, started HEMONC, had me decided not to finish HEMONC. And so she is triple boarded and just a powerhouse of a lady. And I owe so much to her example, but just someone with so much fortitude, yet so much grace as well.
And this was an unusual time to be immigrants in a small place like West Virginia, and a small, talk a little bit about that and how did they make the adjustment?
Sure. I think like most immigrants, it's part of the immigrant experience. I talk about that in the book and touch on sort of the cultural clash and also as we think about health inequities, right? Here you are coming to America, coming from a big metropolis in India to a small rural coal mining town in America. And that can be quite a cultural disconnect. And even growing up, I grew up in Port St. Lucie, very small town in Florida. And I do remember, we just didn't fit, Sri, right? Like there just wasn't anyone that really looked like us at school, in our communities. And so I talk a little bit about the journey and hitting on trust, which is, we all prefer to see someone, particularly when it comes to our health, which is so sensitive. We all want to see someone who looks like us because we think that person will relate to us. I mean, I'll tell you very simply, when I go to school to drop off my daughter, one of the first questions other moms ask me is, hey, Dr. G, do you have a female cardiologist you recommend? Is there a female GI doctor you recommend, right? Because there's this feeling that I'd like to see another woman. And minorities feel the same way. If you're Black, you'd like to see a Black physician potentially. And it does come down to trust, because there is a sense of that person will understand more about me than otherwise. And so to the question earlier about trust, that's something that we do have to be intentional about. We need to be culturally sensitive, and we need to represent the communities that we serve in medicine. And largely we do, but we understate that value, and we understate that human connection really motivates people to make a doctor's appointment and then to do something about their health.
Here's Ellen saying, I'm gobsmacked. Why would someone go to a doctor you didn't trust? And Dr. Tachi is watching from Fort Lauderdale. Everyone must catch her terrific show on IG and elsewhere, so please take a look. And again, Pradnya is doing something so important. She's going in LinkedIn and tagging people who should be looking at the show later We'll be live. We'll be live till about 10 a.m. Eastern, and then we will have the show start again on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and the digimentors.group webpage. So everyone should take a look. And by the way, if you go to digimentors.group, you will also see a link to her first chapter, so you can get that and read more. We want everyone to go out and buy this book, Dead Wrong: Diagnosing and Treating Healthcare's Misinformation Illness. And by the way, just want to, and there's a great quote from Soledad O'Brien, a great friend of this show. Misinformation or downright lies are undermining so many important conversations we need to have in this country. And this book this great book that gets inside how myths and lies cause harm and give us the facts we need to fight back. That's really great. Speaking of Digimentors, our company, we want to tell you that this show is powered by Digimentors, and we do all kinds of other things. We make shows like this, but we do digital marketing, we do PR, we do training and workshops on AI and other issues. And we would love to work with you, anybody who's watching, or a friend who's interested in these topics. And we do event amplification. If you have a gala, you have a launch, talk to us. And the AI workshops, I know Neil has a funny photograph of me when I used to have hair, when we started teaching technology, and now I clearly don't. And I know, Geeta, that you talk a lot about AI and how that's adding to the mis and disinformation out there.
That's right. It's something we can't ignore, Sri, particularly as we're looking at the policy implications, the ethical implications. And in healthcare, this is even more important. So that is exactly correct. This technology can be used for good or for bad, right? And it is a unbelievable force multiplier for good if we are intentional about its use. And we really have to pay attention to this, particularly in the healthcare space, because it can cost people their lives. No one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to play the fool and I want to make bad choices about my health. That's the opposite. We see wearables, watches, rings, you name it. People are out there willing to spend money on things that measure everything from their heart rate to their sleep to their mood. So the consumer has definitely received the message that health is wealth in a post-pandemic world, but we need to give them appropriate tools and ensure that they are being used ethically and for everyone, and that everyone should have access, not just the rich and the elite.
One thing when we talk about technology, AI, because it can create content so easily, is an issue. But if you step back a little bit, WhatsApp has been poisoning, many communities where it's used. I know my own mother, who passed away a year ago. She was fed so much disinformation about health, and it's been something, especially in the Indian community, that we have seen in India and overseas. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on the role that WhatsApp has played.
Sure, and I do talk a little bit about this in the book. And one of the things that folks should walk away with is, if you don't know, if someone sends you something on WhatsApp, which is essentially spreading a bit of by word of mouth via WhatsApp, right? And so, Shri, if you send me something, I assume it's factual and true because it's from Shri. He's my friend. He's my colleague. Be mindful that when something is sent to you, same thing, checking to see if it's correct. Just because it's on WhatsApp doesn't make it correct. Just because it's on Facebook doesn't make it correct. But it's the same concept on WhatsApp. And often people just forward to their group chats without actually even knowing if things are correct or not. And we saw a lot of that during the pandemic. We saw a lot of it globally, where WhatsApp is used much more ubiquitously. But it is an issue.
Here's a little excerpt from your book. It says, as the case count grew in India, so did the rumors. One morning when I opened WhatsApp, my uncle shared a link suggesting that anyone with COVID should stand in front of a window unit air conditioner to get more oxygen in their lungs. There was talk of unproven infection remedies, and goes on and on and on. So you have experienced firsthand, even at a time when there were thousands of people dying every day, there was so much misinformation going out there. And this goes back, there's a famous saying about how by the time, that lies go around the world by the time the truth puts on its pants. And I think in today's world, it's even faster, because the power of misinformation. Again, what we've said before, that it looks so real and it feels so real. That's part of the reason we're here. Neil, over to you.
I was just going to share that on your Instagram page, Anita Rao is watching, and she said, in addition to WhatsApp, YouTube is also a major issue. WhatsApp and YouTube are both sources of mis and disinformation.
Yeah, thank you, Anita, and everyone watching on Instagram. Hi, thank you for being with us. Dr. Chachi says the medical community has not always been respectful of patients of color, and you brought that point up. I think it's really important. Therese is watching from Yonkers, and she's also on Twitter, and she has posted that 52% of Americans don't trust their physicians. Quoting you, the healthcare industry needs to deal with misinformation to reestablish the trust. So people are quoting you as we're going here. Let's see some more comments. Dr. Sudha Parikh says many doctors are doing marketing for alternative medicines and selling. We have a lot of different ethnic groups from different cultures. They're gullible because they trust. So what is your message to folks who feel that, I mean, we want people to trust doctors, right? But trust the right doctors.
So I appreciate all the comments, and Dr. Tracy is in Fort Lauderdale. We'll have I get together at some point. I'm in Miami. But look, I have multiple chapters on inequities, multiple chapters on race, and the historical racism in medicine is a real one. And we have to first acknowledge that and correct the process, the people, and the technology to ensure that healthcare going forward is more equitable. We know that it is not. We know that there is bias in the system, but we are slowly making inroads to correcting those things. But we have certainly room to grow. Look, this is something that an individual physician cannot do. There are pockets of amazing TikToking physicians that have done wonders for medicine and for their patient population. But what we have to do is what Cleveland Clinic does. In chapter 8, I go through the Cleveland Clinic and how they, as a health system, improved trust in their community, improved patient acquisition, retention, and their brand, because this isn't just about doing the right thing, Sri. This is also good business. And if healthcare systems understand that, if providers, payers, life science companies, medtech companies, it really has to be at that enterprise level where these same channels, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, can be used to amplify the facts, can be used to amplify the voice of thousands of physicians and institutions. And largely, healthcare has thought of marketing as an after fact. In many ways, we've looked down on marketing. But this is now how we have to communicate with consumers. This is where the consumers are looking for information, particularly in the absence of finding a physician, right? Particularly if it takes 6 months to even get a physician's appointment. Where will you go? You're not going to sit on your laurels for 6 months. You're going to be reading everything you can. And that's really where the whole system at the enterprise level has to change. And I think demanding that as a consumer from your physician, where should I read? How can I follow up you? Where can I follow you? Right? People want that. And then that physician is also accountable, right? Because if I put out information on rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, I'm accountable for this was my advice. And this is what we do every day in medicine. So it's about amplifying it at a much, much higher level to really make a difference.
One of the things that you've said multiple times now is the wait can be 6 to 9 months to get an appointment in the US medical system. So can I ask you, for those who look down on the Canadian system or the NHS in the UK because you have to wait a long time to get a doctor, how does that reconcile with the wait times here then, if it's anyway so bad?
Well, again, depending on where you are in the country, it can take 6 to 9 months. But I think one of the things we have learned from the pandemic is virtual medicine is here and it's here to stay. People are much more comfortable both on the physician side as well as the patient side with a virtual appointment, which looks a lot like this, Sri, right? Which is just getting in front of a computer or even just a phone call. So I think that reception, that reimbursement has finally been there. The liability protections are there. We need to lean into that. We have to continue to be mindful of hybrid healthcare as a great way to deburden access. And as far as, global health, look, there's no perfect system. There are pluses and minuses to both, but it's critical that we do learn and we do take lessons learned from systems around the world and apply them here. And again, I think artificial intelligence is going to help us to be able to do much of this and help us to take a lot of the friction out in healthcare. So this is the time. This is the time to demand that. This is the time to weigh in on that and to lead us to a better healthcare system. Our healthcare system has the opportunity to do so much better in a post-pandemic world where technology is allowing us to move faster, better, and easier. It's on us to actually make it happen, but we have all the tools right in front of us.
Ellen says she's double gobsmacked. Why would anyone trust medical information on WhatsApp? But sorry, if you listen to WhatsApp, you deserve the misinformation. And here we have Jonathan saying, about the part about not listening to patients of color. Also, doctors don't listen to older patients. So have you had any thoughts on that?
I appreciate all of the comments, and I would say that again, no system is perfect, and I certainly make those acknowledgments and talk about them in depth in the book. And it is a problem. It is a systemic problem that we need to continue to train our clinical staff to be mindful of, and we need to understand that even our technology has human bias in it. So we have to be mindful that the technology only amplifies our good behaviors and our bad behaviors as people. And so all of these things are critical to understand, evaluate, and then ensure that we scale them with more equity in mind, whether it's racial equity, whether it's gender, age, all of these things are important. And I'm with you. I'm with you. I understand.
Yoshita Singh is watching from just outside New York City. She is the New York chief correspondent for Press Trust of India, PTI, and she says, great conversation. And she's a very busy mom on a Sunday morning, is able to join us. So thank you, Yoshida, for watching. Radian is watching from Bayshore in Long Island. Thank you for being here. And Rose Horowitz, who runs her own show about women to follow. She's watching from Connecticut, and we worked together during the pandemic, Rose and I and our colleague Vandana, to do stories to explain every single day for 300 days during the pandemic, including weekends, to give out good information during the pandemic. Doug, who is up early in California, says, when I ran comms at UCSF and Columbia Med at the University of California, San Francisco, getting all the faculty to understand that every time they communicated, they impacted the bigger brand was one of my biggest challenges. One doctor spreading dubious information hurts us all.
So Doug is absolutely correct. And again, I would encourage you to take a look at the chapter on Cleveland Clinic. You're absolutely right. Marketing has to work with their physician leaders, but not to expect doctors to do marketing. Remember, we're living in an era of physician shortages and burnout. Marketing needs to do what marketing does. And, Paul Mattson made kind of a joke when we spoke with him, and he said, he just turned on the camera, made sure the doctors combed their hair, and he said, for 60 seconds, tell me what you tell your patients about a colonoscopy, a mammogram, etc. We need to let our doctors be doctors and let marketing do the magic, which is to make the voice and the message amplified. And that partnership isn't necessarily a natural one, which means that it has to be an intentional one. That is certainly where we're at. And with regards to any healthcare professional spreading dubious information, this is something that has to be examined. And certainly there have been many that have been reprimanded during the pandemic for that in particular, but that is something that has to be addressed, whether it's physicians, whether it's nurses. You're absolutely spot on. Sri, I can't hear
Sri,
you.
you're muted. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yoshida asked, how does one balance the need to know and all the information that is online? That's, of course, what your book is about, dead wrong, diagnosing and treating healthcare's misinformation illness. But what do you tell parents who want to keep up, want to get the right information, but there's just too much going on?
Again, first having a doctor when and if you can, and even to schedule a virtual visit for a consultation and for education is totally appropriate, particularly in pediatrics where there has also been a lot of confusion around vaccines, etc. But looking at the source, Yoshida, right? What is the source of the publication, the website? There are many patient groups that do this really well. This is a discussion I have with my patients routinely with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. I'm a rheumatologist, and I frequently send them to the sources of the places that I know are best. And every physician has those places. If you're a pediatrician, they're going to tell you the American Academy of Pediatrics is a great source. So asking them for those sources, and asking them for those sources on social media as well, because increasingly we do see fantastic sources for that, and from colleagues, from institutions, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, great sources around the world to look at for information. So asking the question, and then understanding if you're looking somewhere else, checking it out. What is the source? Are people echoing those statements from evidence-based medicine organizations? These are all critical things to critically evaluate when you are reading something, particularly when it comes to your health. And then again, if you can complement that with a physician who actually knows your specific situation, your specific personal health situation, and then taking the advice to say, is this general knowledge and information applicable in my particular health situation?
It says as if the wait time to see physicians is running into months, people will turn to information online.
That's right. And again, some of the best places are going to be the patient advocacy groups. And you want to look for general sources for medicine. American Medical Association has a complete patient-facing, consumer-facing side. In rheumatology, the American College of Rheumatology. So if there is the American Diabetes Association. So if you have a disease, if you have a specific specialty that you gravitate to, every one of them has an association, and one that is consumer-facing. So these are often the best places for resources. They're also on social media, and they have terrific patient education materials. And there are, again, numerous ways now to get a virtual visit with a physician that typically are not as long of a wait as an in-person visit.
So Patty's asking about that particularly. Is Dr. Geeta in favor of telehealth care, which it sounds like you are? There are some doctors who emphasize the importance of being there in person, and obviously it also depends on the symptoms and the situation, right?
Sure. So Patty, listen, I think telehealth is here to stay, and it has been overdue. So yes, I'm a big believer in telehealth. I actually sit on the board of the American Telemedicine Association. And when we talk about inequities, this is one of the biggest ways to improve health equity. We simply do not have every specialist. Even in the state of Florida, as a rheumatologist, there are only a handful of us. So we simply are not going to have every specialty in the Midwest or in, rural Nebraska. It's not realistic. So having that access decreases health equity, but also just gives people the opportunity to see some of the most cutting edge specialists and access to some of the most cutting edge therapies in the world. And why would we not take advantage of that? It's high time. It's high time. Of course, certain things have to be done in person, certainly emergencies where procedures are necessary, such as a heart attack. There is a time and place, but for the most part, this has been a huge godsend, and perhaps the only silver lining of the pandemic is that we finally learned how to use these type of visits.
The American Telehealth Medicine Board that you're on, did that exist before the pandemic, or is that after?
Yes, the American Telemedicine Association has actually been around, my goodness, for decades, so long before the pandemic. It's just that it took the crisis to really open up the regulatory environment more than anything. And it really drove people because there was no choice, right? There was no choices. It was safer for both patients and physicians and nurses. And so it really has accelerated the path of virtual medicine. And we're learning more and more how to do things virtually, how to have devices in the home, whether it's to take your own blood pressure, your pulse ox, your pulse. I think it's terrific when we think about rural medicine, and as we think about global health equity. I mean, sure, there are places in villages that simply would have no chance of seeing a doctor, or a 5 to 6 hour drive to get to be seen, which makes compliance impossible, makes access and education that much harder. So I think it's a terrific technology when used appropriately.
Rebecca says, I belong to one Facebook support group of 65,000 people experiencing long COVID. Their concern is language implying the pandemic is over confuses the ongoing effects of not mitigating ongoing transmission and subsequent deaths. They advocate the public emergency is over. COVID is not, they insist. Data seems to support that. I'm wondering how we can help.
So Rebecca, great points. Look, how we can help with having the conversation here, right? And being mindful of the facts and how we can help spread the facts and also be part of the solution. COVID is certainly not gone, but the public emergency is over. And all of the same lessons we learned about COVID, we now have more solutions, whether it's Paxlovid, whether it's masks, whether it's simply having the knowledge to stay home and stay away from others. So we need to be practicing the things that we've now learned from the COVID pandemic. But you're absolutely right. COVID is here, and it's very much like the flu, and we want to take care of ourselves and not spread it to others. But the emergency is over, and we're very lucky for that.
And I think the technical terminology is it's no longer a pandemic, it's endemic. Is that correct?
That's correct. You got it. You got it. And to get vaccinated. The most important thing we can do is to get vaccinated. Everything comes down. The best medicine is always prevention, whether we're talking about breast cancer, colon cancer, or any sort of infection.
Rebecca says, are we discovering the COVID hides like HIV and activated AIDS later?
I'm not quite sure what you're hinting at there, Rebecca, but they are totally different diseases. COVID is a respiratory disease, and it is spread
No,
very
but maybe I think she's talking about how it's not visible or doesn't manifest itself, and it's kind of is that possible that we will see a resurgence?
Well, again, very different diseases, very different immunopathology. So I definitely would not make a correlation to the spread of HIV/AIDS or the implications to immune system. But look, if all of a sudden people are not doing the things that they should be doing, we could see that. I think that's unlikely because it has become endemic, and now we have so much protection against the virus. I don't think we're ever going to have the same type of emergency situation as we had before, but we will see peaks and valleys as we've seen, just like flu season, where people will get sick, will then get better. There are going to be times when the virus will ebb and flow, very similar to flu.
Therese, who's also been tweeting, says, thank you for this important conversation on healthcare and information issues that impact us all. This is a topic, by the way, that I've been interested in a long time. If you may not be able to see the date, but there's an article I wrote in the New York Times in 1996 about health references on the internet. And I said, do not take as medicine. My first sentence is, tired of bothering doctors at parties with medical questions. And then we gave them some websites to go to. And if you look on the right, you'll see that these include JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association, and the American Medical Association itself. And then some things that may not exist anymore, but we also, of course, the cdc.gov, and just trying to help people understand this. And also now I'm looking, it says at the very bottom on the right, it says the Typing Injury Archive. And you might remember that carpal tunnel from repetitive stress injuries of typing was a epidemic among journalists and people who spend a lot of time on their keyboards. But I think when laptops came along, people were just sitting in so many different positions during a day that maybe that's one of the reasons we don't hear as much about RSI and repetitive stress. But anyway, this is a snapshot of my attitude about healthcare and information and misinformation going back to 1996.
Sri, this is fantastic, and only adds to the conversation we're having that mis and disinformation are not new. It is certainly not new. It is just propagating faster in the era of social media and tech. But this is fantastic, and everything you say in this article is still relevant today, minus maybe a few obsolete or missing websites. But otherwise, I would say that you said exactly what I said, which is, hey, make an appointment virtually. Don't believe everything you read. I mean, that's great. That's terrific. I'm so glad you found that.
Thank you. Ken says, it's sad that we even need the term evidence-based medicine, like there could be any other kind. I hope we can tamp down the rampant snake oilery is something that we can all kind of think about. Can you talk a little bit about how you're promoting the book? Are you in physical places? Are you traveling? Talk about that, please. And this is from Pradnya.
Sure. Thanks, Pradnya. Yes, I have been talking all over the world. I'm pretty wiped out this Sunday morning. Just got back from HIMSS in Orlando. But yes, I'm next headed to the Medical Affairs Professional Society. Then I have the American Health Insurance and Payers Organization. So I have any number of speaking engagements coming up. You can see a lot of this on social media, on my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook. LinkedIn as well, and my website has everything you might be needing if you're interested in either booking me as a speaker or just curious to know if I'll be in your town. Thanks so much for asking that.
Anita says, I'd love to hear Dr. Nayyar's perspective on the rise of functional medicine. This markets evidence-based tests, etc. So I'm not familiar with functional medicine.
I have to tell you that I'm still learning about functional medicine. It's not something that I completely understand, and it's not something that existed when I was in medical school. So there is some debate on functional medicine, but I truly don't know enough about it to make an informed statement on it.
Okay, thank you. Folks, we have about 30 minutes left with Dr. Nayyar. We are talking about her book, which is Dead Wrong, Diagnosing and Treating Healthcare's Misinformation Illness. And this is available everywhere that you get your book. So please go out and get it. And also check out her website and follow her on social. She's Dr. G. Nayyar on all the platforms, and find her, follow her as she's been talking about the importance of finding the folks who are giving out good information. We want to remind folks that we did a show for more than a year with two great doctors, female surgeons, a show called She's on Call with Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. And the amount of information that we were able to share in the height of the pandemic was so important, and it made a difference in my learning and understanding about all of this. But let's talk a little bit about the mental health aspect of the pandemic and healthcare. And this will also give me a chance to tell everyone that Neil is hosting a weekly show around mental health issues. It is something that everyone should be watching. And if you go on to his Twitter feed, you will learn all about it. So everyone should check out the show when you can. But if you can talk a little bit about mental health, please.
You bet, Sri. Look, I think, again, perhaps one of the only other silver linings of the pandemic is that mental health really rose to the top. And we have talked about it now in a way we never have before. And I think it's terrific that we are in many ways taking the stigma away. The rise of telemedicine has really dramatically changed the state of mental health for the same reasons that we simply do not have enough mental health professionals to take care of the volumes of patients. And now there are so many virtual medicine services specifically geared for mental health. So the access issues have largely been alleviated, which is terrific. But this continues to be an issue. We particularly during COVID saw this with the isolation of so many families at home with children in particular who were out of school for long periods of time. So I think this continues to be an issue, but I do think as an industry, we are certainly making strides to improvement and to better access.
That's terrific. So one of the things that we'd like to do now is that, would like to read the paper with you and have you reflect on some of the news that you see, because I think you have a great perspective on what's happening in the world. Neil's show, by the way, is called Shining a Light on Shadows, and it's on the second and fourth Thursdays of every month. And Candid Conversation with Don Helmrich. They're the hosts, and they have Jim Newberg coming on. And I'm sure Neil will tell you a little bit more about the show. So I'm going to have Neil come on and read the paper with you, and I'll join you at the end. Folks, tag your friends. This is a very important conversation we're having with Dr. Geeta Nayyar. Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Sri. And I'll just point out that this was last week's show on Thursday with Jim Newberg. We focused on he's an introvert who has dealt with anxiety, depression, and addiction. It was actually a really interesting show because my co-host is his fiance. She's an extrovert dealing with anxiety and depression. So you can find it on my website, neilparekh.org. Shining Light on Shadows, and we have we're producing the show the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. And thank you again, Sri, and to my colleagues at Digimentors for your support in putting this out there. So thank you very much. Actually, and I don't have the card yet, but just as a promo, our next show is March 28th. Brian Miller, who's a former guest on the New York Times Read Along, is going to be a guest on my mental health show. He wrote Dining in the Dark. He was the New York Times restaurant critic, and he was on top of the world in the 80s in New York, and he lost everything because of his depression and his challenges with mental health. So thank you for the plug, Sri. So we'll go ahead and talk about the paper. I'll bring that on and step over. And as Geeta, as we discussed earlier, I'm going to flip through various sections. If you see something that looks interesting that I skip over, please let me know, and we'll go back to it. We already looked at the front page at the beginning of the show. This is an article from a family enjoying the St. Patrick's Day parade, which was on Saturday. And this article about Trump allies are winning war over disinformation. This lead, I think, is really interesting. This is focused, obviously, on election disinformation, but it's a lot of the same principles apply when you're talking about healthcare.
That's
So
right.
let's
And the
go ahead.
implications are scary, right? Whether it's your healthcare, whether it's politics. And so I think we're going to see more. This topic of mis and disinformation is becoming more important to us as a society, period. And so we really do have to be mindful of it again, particularly in an area where social media is unregulated. We're learning how to regulate AI, and we're learning more about AI. We have to realize as a society, this issue is here to stay, and we must contend with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. We always like looking at page A2 and A3 of the paper. We had Megan DeTrolio, the editor for A2 and A3. They redesigned this about a year ago with some really interesting features. This story behind the story, a reporter faces down her fear of snakes. Natasha Frost reports on Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific from Melbourne, Australia. She also co-writes the Australia Letter, a newsletter. And that's actually an interesting development as well. They've started giving more detailed bylines for their reporters to give more of the background of what they do. Here, the dateline where Times journalists are reporting from around the world. Abbeville, Louisiana, there was a disaster after drought conditions boiled crawfish before farmers could harvest them because of the weather. In Colombia, they're reporting from Azerbaijan and from Malaysia. Um, and here's a piece from David Dunlap, who curates the museum at the New York Times, which is an incredible space. We had a chance to go there when we interviewed Jake Silverstein in his office, editor of the New York Times Magazine. We took a tour of the museum. He writes in a column in Times Past exploring an artifact from the archives of the New York Times, and this is about a piece of stained glass, which is really interesting. So we'll want to take a look at that when we can. Um, so turning to the paper, okay, right to COVID, how Australia linked a COVID era hospital gift to Chinese spies, a cautionary tale about broad laws and diaspora groups. Um, that's a very uh, interesting development. I hadn't heard about this yet. The police officers asked the man what he meant when he said that involving an Australian government minister in a charity event would benefit us Chinese. Was he talking about mainland China and the Chinese Communist Party or the local Australian Chinese community? Depending on the answer, he faced up to 10 years in prison. Very interesting. Very interesting. Um, this is the article about the Paris Olympic Games, trying to be more climate friendly. The games will, of course, be this summer. Manila shores up ties as deterrent to China, so more international work. And then this is a really nice display in terms of the photographs, but a very heartbreaking story. And the headline is at the bottom. These are pictures from Gaza City. And the headline, if I can show that to you, practically fasting for months, a joyless Ramadan in Gaza. Ramadan started last week, last Sunday. So this is the first week is over, but this is referring to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza after Hamas's brutal attack October 7th on Israel, and then Israel's retaliatory response. We have articles about the first seaborne aid arrives for Gaza. Iran and U.S. held secret military talks on Mideast threats. More about Ukraine and voting for Putin. Again, in air quotes, voting. Let's see, what else do we have? And now we have the national section. So this is on the right side. This is an interesting article. The Ginsburgs, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's family asked who would draw Justice's name from her prize. If you happen to see the news, the award, which was meant to celebrate women, the RBG award, went to Elon Musk and Rupert Murdoch, which was just incredible. The story on the left, there's these older pictures, but the headline is below the fold: "A favor to fight discrimination paid forward. After 80 years, an Asian American family honors a Black family's kindness." And this is about I think about the Coronado Hotel, which is an interesting historical piece. We have an article about the St. Patrick's Day Parade, but an inclusive St. Patrick's Day Parade on Staten Island. So Marilyn, if you're still watching, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This was this year, for the first time ever, New York City. Every New York City borough will host a St. Patrick's Day Parade that allows LGBTQ groups, bringing a decades-long conflict to an end. So that's good news there.
Neil, there's a long history of the
Of course.
New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade not allowing LGBT presence, and so it's all about progress. Doc, what are some of the, as you look at this, the news, and as you're thinking about this, would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of having sources that you can trust, and seeing this kind of more old-fashioned, obviously, but can you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, look, we all get information from different places, and what we have to remember specifically when it comes to our healthcare is we don't want to make decisions about our healthcare based on rumors, right? So I heard, in our community, it's ginger and turmeric will solve your arthritis, right? And so it's being very mindful that no different than taking your information from rumors or strangers, which we're told even when we're little, right? Not to listen or talk to strangers. We have to do the same for our healthcare. And the sources that we look at are paramount to that, because that is really where we know we're looking at facts versus fiction. And in the era of social media where things look very professional, I mean, WhatsApp, we discussed it earlier. It looked like, there's a graphic, it's in black and white. We can't take things on face value anymore, and looking for the American Medical Association, looking for the Lupus Foundation, looking for those trusted sources is really critical, because often these things can't be undone. When you have made a decision about your health, you can't get kidney function back. You can't get liver function back. It's very difficult to, right? And so being mindful that prevention and being informed will pay it forward in many ways. And taking the time to do that is critical, and also not passing forward information if you're not sure, right? So just because someone sent you something and you're not sure exactly where it came from, take a beat on that, pause on that before you also become part of the problem.
Thank you so much, Geeta. And yes, Sri, I appreciate you giving the historical context for the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York. Having grown up in New York, I just knew that intrinsically and forgot that might be local information, local history that people would need to know. My apologies there. So this gets into the disinformation conversation. Trump allies are impeding efforts to fight disinformation. The captions on the two photos up top: Donald Trump, J. Trump, and his team aggressively used social media to spread falsehoods about voting in the 2020 election. His supporters rallied behind him. This is a picture from Philadelphia. And then Representative James Cormer and Jim Jordan at a House committee hearing on government interference and social media bias in early 2023, specifically the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. There's more here. This is that article about learning to drive, Afghanistan in their rear view. This gentleman has a list of 50 deep in terms of people who are waiting to learn how to drive. From orchestra pit to cockpit, a second career takes flight. And then there's an article from the front page. We'll go back there, speaking out for landlines in a digital age, particularly with the when AT&T went down a few weeks ago. People who have landlines were actually in a better position. Geeta, what's your situation with landlines and or cutting the cord for TV?
Sure. Well, I will tell you that we do not have a landline, and we have cut the cord on TV, so we use any number of streaming services. But I will make a fun joke about healthcare, which is that at the same time, the fax machine is alive and well in the healthcare industry. I think the healthcare industry is single-handedly keeping the fax machine alive. So it's an interesting era of innovation and tech, but the realities of healthcare are still quite antiquated.
Why is that? We actually had some healthcare things we had to deal with in our family, and we found that not only were we they were having to fax records back and forth from our primary care to a specialist, but then also, when there were images that need to go from one doctor to another, we actually had to go pick up a CD and bring it to physically to the other office. Does that make sense in 2024?
Oh, it absolutely doesn't make sense. I think we know that. So this is what I mean about being intentional about the technology that we have. We have great technology. This is not a technology issue. This is a competition issue. This is a standard issue. But it is because everyone is not connected, right? Those two doctors that you mentioned are likely not part of the same system, may or may not be in the same zip code. And so the interfaces that they use are different, and there is continued to have there's progress in the regulatory space in this regard, but we're not there. And so this is where being the consumer and being in the driver's seat, goodness, you just had that article, you do need to take control of your health, and you need to understand that Columbia is not connected to NYU, is not connected to any other hospital in Florida, if that's where you end up being a snowbird. So being able to access your data and having it, because as physicians, we can't solve this issue for you. This is a system issue and a policy issue.
Yeah, it can be very frustrating. Dr. Tachi said it's so interesting that healthcare holds on to the facts. And she's watching on YouTube. Um, and Jonathan is saying that interestingly, my local senior center recommended that seniors abandon landlines. Since the old copper wires are no longer being supported by Verizon, et cetera, there's some question about how long they will even work. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Um, Doug Levy says many of us in California keep a landline as a backup for emergencies. Somewhat helpful, though less so if the phone lines are on utility poles. Um, and this is actually touching a chord. Ellen says landlines are the best. Verizon cut me off of a copper wire and line last year. At least in New York City, there are no copper wire landlines left. You may call your second number a landline, but it is digital, not copper wire. And Dr. Tachi says that suppose this opens up opportunities for tech companies to develop systems for hospitals, etc. Pradnya has a question. I'm curious about your perspective on concierge medicine, given the ongoing communications complexities among care providers. Yeah.
Sure. I think we see concierge medicine happening a lot more than in the past because, frankly, physicians are burnt out. They are also very disenfranchised with the reimbursement models and having to work around the system in many cases and not being compensated for that. And because physicians want to spend time with their patients, they genuinely enjoy spending time with their patients. And in today's system, it's just continues in many ways to work against the physician. So the problem with concierge medicine is it opens up more health inequity, right? Because then we have physicians who leave sort of general healthcare, and those who can take advantage of concierge medicine for the most part are people with resources. And so we end up with more of a divide. So this is something that we have to make the system better. We have to make it work both for physicians and patients. And, we often divorce the idea of a good physician experience from the patient experience. They're actually tied, right? You're never going to have a good patient experience if you're also not ensuring that physicians are able to practice at the top of their license and in an environment that brings them joy and is not full of friction. So it's a terrific point. But that has been how many physicians are working around the system, is by leaving and doing concierge medicine.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have about 15 minutes left with Dr. Geeta. We have a few more sections we might want to review. And then, of course, we want to go back to her book as well before we finish. So, Geeta, if you have your preference, what section would you like to look at? Opinion, business, arts, book review? Where do you go?
Yeah, I always really enjoy the arts and the book review. I spend so
Okay.
much time reading science and nerdy science and tech magazines that that's one of my favorite parts of the New York Times.
Let's take a look at arts and leisure. The cover story, On the Move and Looking Ahead. This is about Adrian Lenker's last two solo records came from a place of sorrow. On the new one, the Big Thief singer and songwriter's perspective is far more relaxed. So that's the cover picture. Let's see what's inside. Inside culture, there's a picture on the left. Thousands turned up last month. You can't see the caption, but thousands turned up last month at the opening night of Olivia Rodrigo's Guts World Tour in Palm Desert, California. And OK McCausland, who photographed some of the fans in attendance, noticed these two before the show. It looked like they had gotten ready and done their hair together, a common part of young womanhood and what girls often like to do. There's this headliner article, Lisa Ann Walter steps on the gas. It was a Monday in Los Angeles, and Lisa Ann Walter had the day off from Abbott Elementary. The season 3 premiere of the ABC sitcom was a little over a week away. So this is a quick interview with her. We have mining the music of her parents' lives. Family history is wrapped up in these songs, the tunesmith Ingrid Michaelson says of her Broadway debut with The Notebook. The Notebook, do you remember seeing the movie? Must have been like 20 years ago, right?
Of course, every woman remembers that movie.
It was a good movie. It's not just women who were able to connect with that. That was
Fair enough.
something.
Fair enough.
That was something. So it's on Broadway now. And then So Much More Than a Composer's Muse. New recordings capture the artistry of Yvonne Loriod beyond Olivier Messiaen. And I apologize for the mispronunciation. So here's an interesting article about dance. And this is what I'd say, we talk about this with the New York Times when we look at the print. Do you look at the print paper much at all, or just digital? How do you access the news?
Yeah, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. I always try to grab the paper when I'm at the airport, which is pretty frequently, but I also have the digital version for kind of every day on my iPad.
And that's what I do. I'm looking at my phone, looking at the paper 20 times a day, for much less, everything else I'm doing. But looking at the print edition, we always talk about serendipity, that you don't, there are articles that you won't seek out necessarily when you're looking on your phone or iPad. You go to your familiar sections. I may not have gone through the arts and leisure section if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for the Sunday paper. So, this interesting article about at this pub, the Irish moves are all inclusive. So continuing that same conversation from the parade, Gailey, an LGBTQ friendly program in Brooklyn, makes sure that the dance steps are secondary to having a good time. And then this article about Adrian Lenker, the force behind the band Big Thief, finds clarity and confidence with her 5th solo album, Bright Future. That's the photograph. And this is the bottom of the fold that we see here. So what else do we have here? We have these detailed views may be deceiving. Dramas and art house films have taken a page from blockbusters and are relying extensively on computer imagery to set the right scene. Are you a movie buff? Do you have time for movies with all your travel and speaking?
I do. I watch a lot of Netflix though.
Netflix. What are you watching on Netflix?
To Kill a Tiger is on my list for this week. I don't know if you've seen that. They won an Oscar, but it looks like a brilliant, brilliant movie.
3?
Yeah, so we want to, this is as we're wrapping up here, we want to just talk a little bit. We're going to give Dr. Geeta a moment to catch her breath and just take her off the screen right there. And we are going to talk, Neil and I, about what's coming up and what else we are doing. So Neil, tell us about what we have in store. We have some great guests coming up in the weeks ahead.
Absolutely. We have for our next guest, we're looking forward to this. AJ Bauer is going to be our guest. He is a professor, assistant professor of journalism, a writer, editor, journalist, and academic. And he researches conservative news and right-wing media. So we're going to take a step away from healthcare and the healthcare industry, et cetera. But I'm sure disinformation will continue to be a theme next week when AJ is our guest.
One of the things that I have seen, there are people who say, we watch Fox News so you don't have to. And AJ is one of those kinds of folks who is studying conservative media. The impact that that's having on the political landscape is so big, and especially this year as we're coming up on the election. So lots for us to talk about. I do want to say, I get some notes, Neil, occasionally, people who are really upset about the New York Times and how it covers the world. And when that happens, they point out our read along and say, you work with the New York Times. We don't actually do anything with the Times. This is our own show. We are independent. We obviously work with them to have guests on occasion, but this is really our show. And for those of you who are critics of the New York Times, we want to hear from you. We think that this show is about having an accurate view of the world, but it's not just about the New York Times. We've done the Washington Post, the Chicago Daily Times, Khaleej Times out of Dubai, the Toronto
Globe and Mail,
and so many other publications. And we want to continue to do that. We're always looking for great guests. We're always looking for suggestions. So if you have any, please let us know. And I'm committed to making sure we have one of the folks who are very vocal about the New York Times and being critical of it. We will have them on the show in the next months. So please look for that. But we're always looking for guest ideas. So please let us know. Our emails are neil@digimentors.group and sri@digimentors.group. Please write to both of us. And there's a reminder that the show is brought to you by Digimentors, the company that we work with. And of course, we do marketing. We do shows like this. If you'd like a podcast of your own, we do training and workshops, including AI workshops, and we do event amplification, helping your events be bigger online. And we want to thank our friends at Muckrack for sponsoring us all of these years. We're very grateful to them. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you can let us know at Sri@Digimentors or Neil@Digimentors.group. We'd love to have you support us. And I want to give a shout out to Neil's other show, which he's doing. He does a lot of shows for our clients, but the show that he's doing about mental health is so important. He does it twice a month, and he just did an episode last week. Everyone should be watching it, and he has some great guests coming up on that show as well. So I want to just make sure we look at the book review before we bring back Dr. Geeta. This is 22 of the funniest novels since Catch 22. And Dwight Garner, Alexandra Jacobs, and Jennifer Zilai are the folks at the Times book critics who are talking about it. So some of these books you will know, some of these books you won't know. But here's Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth, Tales of the City, Oreo, The Wig, Mrs. Caliban, Heartburn, The Secret Diary of Adrienne Mole, Money, A Suicide Note by Martin Amis, A Far Cry from Kensington by Muriel Spark, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, Bridget Jones's Diary, The Quick and the Dead by Joy Williams. These are among the 22 funniest novels since Catch 22. Must be the anniversary of Catch 22, and that's why they are doing this. So if you get a chance, you'll want to check that out. Folks, this is the New York Times Read Along. We do this every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and at digimentors.group. If you go to digimentors.group and look for the New York Times Read Along, you can find about 3 years worth of archives there. We've been doing the show for 8 years on the social media channels. So go to digimentors.group, and you'll also find the first chapter of Dr. Geeta Nayyar's book, Dead Wrong, the Diagnosing and Treating America's Misinformation Illness. And you can see I love the red typography there. And Dr. Geeta is back with us. Dr. Geeta, so as we wrap up here, would love to hear your thoughts, and tell us, we were talking about marketing, and not everybody likes it, but I'd like you to do some marketing for your book. Tell us why everyone should be reading your book and getting it for their family and friends too.
Thank you so much, Sri and Neil. Well, first of all, this book is for everyone. So it is the kind of book that will appeal to everyone, all ages, all races, ethnicities. So I think you'll love it if you read it. And it's full of stories. So it's an easy to read book as much as it's making up lots of different points in healthcare. You can get the book anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, your local bookstore. It's out there. And if you want a glimpse, my website also has a breakdown of each chapter, what to look forward to, and just different snippets from the book. And if you feel inspired to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, X, Facebook, you name it, and I'm there, and I look forward to hearing from you.
And here is the page with her the chapter summaries, which I actually have never seen before, Geeta. So I thought this was really good, and I'll make it a little bit bigger for folks to see. The chapter 1, Fatal Misconception, Pandemic of Lies. You can see the different titles, and then it just continues. So well done in terms of the website, and you have the links to finding the book at various resellers. Great job with the website.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do want to give you a chance to give a shout out to this young person.
Thank you. Yes. So my daughter did the artwork. Every chapter has a graphic. My daughter, Sonia, she and one of the medical students, Naya, that I mentor at the University of Miami, did each graphic has been done by them. So they both have a cameo, and it's very personal that way. And then there's a picture of both of them in the back working on the art. So
yeah, here's an example of the graphic right there. This is about a shock to the healthcare system.
And I will tell you, I had to explain each chapter to them, and every chapter they were like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I was like, I know, just draw something that this is about. it was very interesting to have both the girls say, well, that doesn't make sense. That's not fair. Why would we do that?
Before we close, Sri, we have some great comments from folks. Rahadian says, thank you all for a great show. Dr. Tachi says the show is wonderful. There's nothing like it. And Rahadian endorses what you said earlier, and we will make it a point. It's an important area to critique the New York Times and other media organizations' coverage, especially internationally. Patty Freudenberg says thank you. Patty Freudenberg says thank you, Dr. Geeta, and the entire production team for a great show. I didn't know that this was a possibility, Sri, but I guess we should keep our eye out. Rahadian is hoping that we're never replaced by AI. I'm just going to look over my shoulder and make sure we don't have to worry about that just yet. I think my mom says a nice show on misinformation. Thank you to all of us. And I think we can potentially end Ken's comment. Dr. Nayyar, misinformation is the challenge of our epoch. Your wonderful perspective is so appreciated. I can't wait to devour your book. Not just read, but devour your book.
Thank you, Ken.
Absolutely.
Amazon reviews are welcome. I will also add that. I am competing with a murder mystery called Dead Wrong. So that's the algorithm. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Funny. Yeah.
Well, there may be times when it's actually helpful, so you never know.
Yeah. The publisher said you got to get more reviews. So.
All right, everyone, go into your Amazon, buy the book, and review it. Obviously, we want accurate reviews, so make sure you've done that. And,
no misinformation in the reviews.
Yeah, exactly.
The only good one.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, that's Dead Wrong, Diagnosing and Treating Healthcare's Misinformation Illness. Geeta Nayyar was our guest. What a great show. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. If you joined us late, as soon as we finish, shortly, just a few minutes after we're done, you'll see the show from the very beginning on those same channels. And Rahadian has already promised to do a review on Amazon and Goodreads. So that's great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.